Hey guys, welcome to today's episode, and we have Deborah Maragopoulos today with us, and we are going to be talking about everything hormones. So we're going to be talking a little bit about menopause. We're going to be talking about your thyroid. We're going to be talking about so many different things. We're going to talk about how to not have hot flashes. We're going to talk about brain fog, a lack of libido, how to beat menopause, and some life-changing hormonal health hacks. So welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, let's first talk about when you are seeing somebody go into menopause, one of the things that you do is you talk about beating menopause naturally. Give us some of your tips that you have that if you want to manage menopause naturally and holistically, what would be some of the things that you could do?
Well, my focus on menopause is really trying to get my patient's hypothalamus in balance, because that is the core organ, the master organ that's controlling all of the hormonal responses. So you're getting hot flashes because your hypothalamus is out of balance. Your brain fog is there because your hypothalamus is out of balance. You're moody and irritable because your hypothalamus is out of balance. Everything but vaginal dryness is related to hypothalamic dysfunction. So all the other symptoms, low libido, everything you can imagine, your bone loss, the aging of your skin, your loss of muscle tone, everything that's making you age quickly is because your hypothalamus is out of balance. So my focus is to do 5 different things that actually focus on optimal hypothalamic health. And so the hypothalamus is not just at the basis of menopause, but it's the basis of all your hormonal imbalances, your gut imbalances, your immune system, your neurological system. So I start with nutraceutical support, and that basically means I'm feeding the hypothalamus what it needs in order to optimally function, so that it's not so thrown off by your all of a sudden declining sex steroids. And it's supporting your adrenal glands, because that's where you can make the majority of your sex steroids as you're going through menopause. And it's not so dysregulated in terms of sleep control, in terms of the temperature control, in terms of the brain fog. It becomes much more imbalanced. And so I've seen in my patients, just with nutraceutical support, with doing nothing else, that they've been able to delay the actual menopause for 5 to 10 years. So they kind of ride it off before they finally kind of poop out and there's no more eggs and their estrogen levels plummet. So that's been the biggest success that I've had, is my hypothalamic nutraceutical. Then after that, I just make sure they're eating very well, more of a Mediterranean-based diet, lots of plant-based foods, lots of color, organic and locally grown if possible, getting enough protein for their lean body mass, about half a gram per pound of lean body mass, making sure they're eating healthy fats. And of course, avoiding processed foods and too much sugar and excess alcohol and caffeine. And then they have to stay active. If they're sedentary, they're going to age faster. And activity actually stimulates the hypothalamus to keep your metabolism running, so you're not going to get that middle-age weight gain. So being active is really, really essential. And then I want to make sure that they're getting enough sleep. And that's hard if they're menopausal, because they have menopausal insomnia because their estrogen levels are low. And that causes the hypothalamus to kind of wake up, and the adrenal glands wake up, and you produce cortisol, and you're up in the middle of the night with a hot flash, and you're anxious, and you feel like somebody yelled your name, like there's fire in the room, and you feel like you're on fire. And that's all because the hypothalamus's day-night cycles are all messed up. So the nutraceutical support will help with that, but you also need really good sleep hygiene. You need to go to bed at the same time. You need to not stimulate your eyeballs with screens that are basically telling you it's daytime instead of nighttime. So get off your phone and your devices and watching television late at night. And don't stimulate your mind with crazy news and worry. And try to start your bedtime routine. Your hypothalamus is super sensitive to your warm bath. You know, you're basically getting in your pajamas. It starts noticing when you're going to bed. So it starts turning on those nocturnal hormones so that you can get that deeper sleep. And then the last thing is mindset. The women that I have helped through menopause, and that's been thousands of women over more than 30 years, who have a healthy, healing mindset, meaning they don't believe once they reach, menopause age, 50, 52, 55, or now younger, we're seeing in so many women, that they're going to just start falling apart. They're going to get a big gut, and they're going to start developing all these chronic illnesses, and they're not going to be able to have the energy to, work and to handle their, their families and their grandchildren. If they have a healthy mindset, they use menopause to their best benefit, and to the point where they're become very productive. It's like they start a whole new book of their life, and they become the sage and share their wisdom. And it's actually a really beautiful transition.
Let's talk about some life-changing hormonal health hacks that include also some things that are for your thyroid. So if you are going to give someone some health hacks, what would those be?
So because the hypothalamus controls the pituitary thyroid axis, so the way your thyroid functions is because the thyroid hormones go back up to the hypothalamus and tell the pituitary to produce TSH, and then you produce thyroid hormones. The majority of people who have low functioning thyroids, or at least they feel like it's low functioning, they have low energy, they're constipated, they're cold all the time, their hair is thinning. Classic sign is that the outer thirds of their eyebrows are really like thin, like they lose that eyebrow there. Oftentimes their blood work is normal. And that's because their hypothalamus is not responding to their thyroid hormone. So it's not telling the pituitary to tell the thyroid to make more hormone. So again, the nutraceutical is huge. You have to actually support your hypothalamus so that it can function properly. And I've had patients who've been on thyroid hormone treatment and be able to get off of it by supporting their hypothalamus. It takes time, at least 3 months, sometimes longer, to completely wean off, but your body's able to make thyroid hormone again. So the key is also that you're getting enough iodine in your diet. Iodine comes from, basically foods, mainly from seafoods, sea vegetation and fish. If you live in the middle of a country, you're not close to the ocean, you probably are going to be iodine deficient, so you need to eat foods that are rich in iodine. If you live in a place where you are not getting enough iodine for many, many years, you can actually develop a goiter where your thyroid gets bigger and bigger and bigger, trying to get more iodine, attract more iodine to make more thyroid hormone. And then when you start supplementing with iodine because you think that's what you need, you literally can become hyperthyroid. So you have to be careful in terms of taking iodine supplementation. You need to eat iodine in your diet. Okay. So that's super important. And then basically you want to keep your gut healthy because your thyroid hormones are, as well as all your hormones, are metabolized through your liver and through your gut. And if your gut's out of balance in terms of its intestinal microflora, the bugs that are growing in there that are supposed to keep you healthy, then your metabolism of your hormones is going to be off. And you're going to basically use them too quickly, or you recycle them. So you become either hypo or hyper in the way you respond to your hormones. So your gut has to be healthy. It's communicating directly to the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus is telling it what to do as well. So that's super key, is gut health.
Guys, I just want to interrupt for just a second, and I want you to hear Paul Saladino talk about why liver is so important. And if you don't like liver, we have another option for you.
Your ancestors were eating liver. And the reason that this sort of wisdom has been passed down is because liver is very nutritious. It's basically nature's multivitamin. If you look at the nutrients in meat, they're great. You've got zinc, you got B6, you got B12, you got some K2. But if you look at liver, it really complements what's in muscle meat. And there are many unique nutrients found in organs, specifically liver as a powerhouse of these, that are difficult to obtain outside of liver. Like meat and organs are like peanut butter and jelly. They just go together. They're supposed to be eaten together. The easiest way to eat liver is just to do it raw. If you don't want to eat liver raw, you can cook it. But the reason that I like to do it raw is because there are unique nutrients in liver that are probably somewhat degraded when you cook the liver.
This really is like the most nutrient-rich supplements that you can find, and they are amazing. I have tried them. I absolutely love them. So just go to heartandsoil.co, use the coupon code Chantel Ray, and save you some money there. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about that, because I do think I like what you said about eating foods that are high in iodine. It's so funny because my husband, he loves getting this Demoshi bowl. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but he swears because if he gets a Demoshi bowl, he feels like $1 million. And one of the things that is in the Demoshi bowl is, a lot of times he might get shrimp in there, which has a lot of iodine. but seaweed, like they have like seaweed in there and like nori, in there. And so he'll have like, it has like a crab salad in there and some other things. And then in the morning, he'll have eggs. And so he always says, like, if I have eggs in the morning, which is a good source of iodine, and then he has that bowl that has maybe, shrimp and seaweed and, that sort of thing. He's like, I always feel like $1,000,000. And I tell him, I'm like, I think it's because you're getting the iodine that you need, and then your thyroid is functioning because, most adults need about like 150 micrograms of iodine a day. And if you're not getting that, and like you said, getting it through your food is the best, and then supplementing with it if you need to. What other foods do you recommend for someone to get really good iodine?
So it's mainly what is coming from the ocean. So it's those, like you said, the nori and the sea vegetation and also seafood. But there are also other foods that have micro amounts of iodine in it. So basically it's the colorful vegetables. It's going to be your protein foods have some iodine in it. So, anything coming from, like you said, eggs, dairy products have a little bit of iodine in it. Meat, chicken, fish, all of it has iodine. Fish is going to have way more. So basically eating the proteins that have the iodine and making sure you're getting that sea vegetation in your diet. A lot of people don't, they don't like seaweed. They don't eat it. They get soy paper wraps instead of seaweed wraps on their sushi. But that seaweed is so good for you. And it's pretty tasty. You can get seaweed snacks, like at Trader Joe's or something, and they taste basically like chips. So you just need to start including it, because we were really meant as a species to actually grow up and feed close to the sea and ocean. We weren't meant to live very well in the middle of countries, okay? All of civilization starts by water. And so our genetics is designed to actually have quite a bit of iodine in our diet. So once we move away from the seas and the oceans, we go in the middle of the country and we can't get iodine-rich foods, then you're going to end up seeing, goiters, hypothyroidism, and hypothyroid symptoms. You're tired all the time. You don't feel like $1,000,000 because thyroid is how you actually turn on that mitochondria to make energy. That's T3. That's its job.
One of the things that's funny is that I like seaweed salad, but I hate, like, if I order sushi, I don't like the seaweed wrap that's with it. I don't like it, but I will eat a seaweed salad, which is strange, but it's just how I am. So let's talk about for your thyroid, like, one of the things that is contradictory a little bit that people say is that some people, when they have dairy, they thrive on it because, again, dairy products are a major source of iodine. And so when they have the dairy, that has the iodine that they need. But then there's other people who say iodine dairy products really affect their thyroid in a negative way. And when they eat dairy, their thyroid doesn't function. What is your opinion on that?
Well, I think a lot of that comes from what your genetics are. So again, if you are a seafaring people, like for instance, I'm from the Mediterranean. I'm Italian. My husband's Greek. We basically are used to lots of seafood. We don't do as well with high dairy products. You stop feeding milk to children who are no longer being breastfed. They don't get milk anymore. They might get fermented cheeses, but they don't get milk anymore. And it's because there's a lot of lactose intolerance in that population. Those countries that are more in the middle of the country, those populations in the middle of the country where they have a lot of dairy producing animals and herds, they actually are able to tolerate lactose better. So they're getting the iodine from their dairy products, but they're not having lactose issues as well, which is causing an autoimmune type reactions to their own thyroid as well. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have autoimmune thyroiditis, which is actually kind of common, it's usually because it's being induced by environmental stuff like foods that you really shouldn't be taking. So just because dairy sounds like it's good for everybody, it really isn't. It's good for certain populations. So it's the same as soy. Soy is great if you're Asian, okay? That population grew up with soy products. Soy can actually inhibit thyroid function if you're not Asian. Okay, in the Black populations, the Caucasian population, they do not do as well with high levels of soy because it actually binds up thyroid hormone production and the conversion of T4 to T3, which is the active hormone.
Okay. Let's talk about bioidentical hormone replacement therapy and what your opinion on it is, and also talk a little bit about just hormone replacement therapy that's not bioidentical. What's your opinion on that?
So I think the majority of women benefit during the menopausal transition from some hormone replacement therapy. I only recommend bioidentical. Bioidentical basically means that it biochemically looks just like what your ovaries would be producing. Okay, it wasn't synthesized, in a lab. It actually comes from some kind of a natural source, like from soy or yam. And then, of course, I'm not getting progesterone directly out of the wild yam or estrogen directly out of the soy. It does have to be tweaked in the lab, okay? So humans have to do something with it, or a bacteria has to grow the estradiol, okay? Those are still natural sources, but the key is that what comes out of it is bioidentical. So the difference is, for instance, bioidentical progesterone is a whole different molecule than progestins that are synthetic. Progestins are not progesterone. They have a progesterone-like effect in the uterus, but they only have 19 carbons on them, versus progesterone is a 21 carbon molecule, totally different molecule. So just because it acts like a hormone doesn't mean it's the hormone. And so you want to be sure that you're getting the bioidenticals because that's what your body's used to. That's what your receptor sites will accept. That's what your body will have the easiest time metabolizing and won't cause liver issues or metabolic issues. So that being said, I do think women do respond very well to bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. And according to what their risk factors are, they may be a good candidate for it to help them through the transition. Now, in my patients who've been supporting their hypothalamus nutraceutically, and my product is called Genesis Gold, and it has the seaweeds in it, et cetera, that helps with the thyroid, but many other things. They usually use very little bioidentical, if at all, because they don't really need it. Their hypothalamus is well balanced. Once they go into menopause, they may need a little support, maybe for a few years, maybe longer. And women can take bioidentical hormone replacement therapy for years. I've had patients in their 80s still wanting to use bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. It's a very individualized decision for each woman, her risk factors for estrogen-related cancers, and basically, what her lifestyle is and what she really wants out of these hormones. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I want to kind of really talk about the hypothalamus for just a second, because I want to explain in my own words what I think it is. And then I want you to kind of say yes or no. Okay. So from what I understand, basically, the hypothalamus is actually in your brain. And it's a small region in the brain, and it connects to your endocrine system, and it helps regulate your thyroid, your adrenal glands, your, reproductive glands and stuff like that. And basically, it's kind of like your body's kind of smart control. So basically, it helps manage like whatever your body's temperature is going to be. So if you're always cold, that, is an issue. It also affects like your hunger and thirst and your sense of fullness when you're eating. And so it kind of does a lot of different things. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. And even more. So the way you described it as that smart sensor is excellent. So the hypothalamus's job is to maintain homeostasis, meaning balance in your body. If you actually put your fingers right between your eyebrows and went right into the center of your brain, is where your hypothalamus is. It's the size of an almond in a shell. Hanging from it is the little pituitary gland. Most of us are more aware of the pituitary gland. And even in medicine, we've been more aware of the pituitary gland because you can measure pituitary hormones. You can't really measure many of the hypothalamic hormones. And the hypothalamus is made up of a multitude of neurons that actually communicate directly to the pituitary via hormones. So there's master hormones the hypothalamus makes, that tells the pituitary what to do. And it's getting feedback from your body. So through the bloodstream, it's not protected by the blood-brain barrier. Through the bloodstream, it's getting the rest of your hormones your body's making. But the hypothalamus also controls your autonomic nervous system. That's the system, parasympathetic and sympathetic, and it controls your blood pressure, your heart rate, your breathing rate, how much, how well your kidneys work, basically stimulates bone growth and communicates to your gut and to your fat cells via the sympathetic nervous system. So it works with the nervous system, it works with all of your hormones, it controls glucose metabolism and how your liver functions. It also communicates directly to your gut with your microorganisms, the biome in your gut. And it controls your immune system. So your thymus basically where your heart chakra would be, is where your thymus would be. And that actually programs your T cells. It's the hypothalamus that tells it when to do this and how to do it. It controls your day-night cycles. So it's pineal gland produces melatonin, but it's the hypothalamus that tells it it's time to produce melatonin.
I don't know about you guys, but I am stressed. And if you're feeling overwhelmed this holiday season, then I get it. With all the family get-togethers, it is just a relentless source of stress. But anyway, there is something that I've got called Stress Guardian, and it's actually made by Biooptimizers, the people who make the magnesium breakthrough, which I love, love, love. But anyway, they are literally made this new product. It has 14 adaptogenic herbs, and it just regulates your stress. I just actually took some right this second, and it's awesome. If you go to stressguardian.com/wasteaway and put in waste away for 10% off your first order, it's stressguardian.com/wasteaway. Go there now. Yeah. So one of my friend's sons, who's very thin, I always look at him and he has lost the outside third of his eyebrow. And I've always heard, if you lose your outside third of your eyebrow, that's a classic sign that it's been linked to hypothyroidism or low blood levels of thyroid hormone. So I guess my question is, he's just super, super thin. So in my mind, is there any other reason why someone would lose that, third of their eyebrow? Or could it be still, even if he's really thin, it could still be just hypothyroidism?
Yeah, so just because you're hypothyroid doesn't mean you necessarily gain weight. Okay, you can gain weight or you can lose weight being hypothyroid. It kind of matters if your thyroid is actually producing enough hormones or not, because there's something wrong with your thyroid, or you have a receptor site resistance. So the way hormones get into cells is through little doorways called receptor sites. So for people who have thyroid hormone resistance, they can produce the normal amount of thyroid hormones. All their blood work will look good. In fact, they'll have an imbalance between the TSH and T4, which is like a seesaw. Their TSH should be high if T4 and T3 are low and vice versa, but they're not. They basically may have low normal levels of T4 and T3 and low TSH, and that's not good communication. That's a classic sign of central hypothyroidism. And usually it's because they're resistant to thyroid hormone. So they can still have a pretty healthy metabolism. They've adapted to that, and so they're thin, but they're not getting all the thyroid hormone they need to grow eyebrows. They may have thinning hair. They may have really dry skin. They may feel cold all the time.
So what else for your thyroid? I love that you said the iodine deficiency. What else do you see when somebody is having thyroid issues? Would it be selenium, or what else is it that you're seeing people are struggling with and what they're deficient in specifically?
Well, selenium helps your thyroid peroxidase enzyme actually work on the thyroid globulin. So you've got this big protein molecule in the thyroid that has to be chopped up into pieces to make T4 and T3. So selenium is part of that process. So if you don't get enough selenium in your diet, you may have some inability to actually produce all the thyroid hormone you're able to produce. So, and again, selenium is a microdosed mineral. So you don't want to overdose with it. But oftentimes with thyroid support, when I have a patient who's really not producing enough and we've done everything we can for the hypothalamus and they're still not producing enough, or they're resistant at the receptor site level, then giving them support with, low levels of iodine, low levels of selenium, certain amino acids can actually really help their thyroid function better, so that their thyroid's doing a better job at making the hormones. And that doesn't have to be forever. It may just be a short period of time where we're kind of fertilizing the thyroid until the grass grows kind of thing. We don't have to do it constantly. I've had people come to me where they've taken iodine supplementation and high doses of selenium and actually thrown themselves out of balance. So you have to be kind of careful and not over supplement, and supplement only if you have deficiencies or only if you have certain signs that show that you might be deficient.
Mm. All right, I'm going to ask you a listener question, and it's actually really funny. It's long, so I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. It's from a guy named Scott in Austin, Texas.
Okay.
He says, my wife listens to your podcast all the time, and I have to listen to it while she's in the car. She's obsessed with it, and I do want to thank you because she's lost over 30 pounds after reading both of your books, Waste Away, One Meal into Tasting, and listening to your podcast. One of the things that I heard while listening to the podcast, and I will admit I've only listened to it twice, is you had a guest on there talking about being freezing cold. For me, I'm constantly, one day I'm cold, one day I'm hot, one day I'm cold, one day I'm hot. My wife constantly tells me that my thyroid is a problem. I went and got my blood work done, and it's saying, no, I do not have a problem. What are your thoughts? And then there's more to it, but I'm not going to read the whole thing. But that's basically the gist of the question is, one day he's cold, and anytime he's cold, the wife says, it's your thyroid, it's your thyroid, it's your thyroid, but it doesn't happen all the time. It's like one day, and that he's gotten his blood work done, and the doctor says that there's no problem with the thyroid. So,
and that's really typical. The majority of patients I see are told that their blood work is normal, but he has a classic hypothalamic dysregulation of the temperature. So temperature regulation is controlled by the hypothalamus. And the thyroid is part of temperature, but it's not the only thing, okay? So when your thyroid is really, really low, you're going to have your thyroid hormones low, you're going to have a low body temperature. If your thyroid hormone's too high, you make too much, you'll have a high body temperature. But the regulation of that is in the hypothalamus. So him going back and forth between cold and hot is a classic hypothalamic dysregulation. We see that in women going through the change in menopause, where they have hot flashes and then they're freezing, and that's that hypothalamic dysregulation. So one of the things that is helpful is looking at those thyroid hormones to really rule out that it isn't hypothalamic. Sometimes they'll be told it's normal, and a lot of times all they do is a TSH, and that doesn't give you enough information. You need a TSH with a free T4 and a free T3. And then you need to be sure those are at the right level to each other. Are they appropriate? So if you're hypothyroid and your T4 and T3 are low, your TSH will be above normal, okay? If you're hyperthyroid, it's just the opposite. T4 and T3 are high, TSH is below normal limits. But a lot of times people are told they're normal when both TSH and T4 and T3 are at the bottom ends of normal. That's miscommunication between the hypothalamus, pituitary, and the thyroid gland. So is he really normal? I would question that, okay?
I think it's just so funny because what makes me laugh about that is no matter who I'm with, let's say they are cold, and it's not really cold. Like, I'm not cold.
Right.
And I base everything of whether I'm cold or not. And so they'll be like, I'm freezing. And I feel like I'm not cold. I'm like, you need to get your thyroid checked. It's like my first thing that comes out of my mouth. So I think it's funny when I read that question, but it is probably a really good sign is if everyone at the table is not cold and you're freezing, let's check, is your thyroid working, and how's your hypothalamus?
Right. And typically with low thyroid, what's typically cold in these people is their hands and feet, not generally their whole body. So that's just another thing, like, this is a pearl that I teach my medical practitioners, is that a lot of times people will say they're tired when they're hypothyroid. The fatigue with hypothyroidism is very interesting. They actually function fine if they keep moving. So when you're moving around, so they're working and doing something, as soon as they sit down, they fall asleep. They feel they're going to nod off. They're the people who nod off like on a car ride, and it's because when you're moving, you're stimulating mitochondrial energy production. And then when you sit still, that is classic low thyroid function. And you've probably seen people like that, like, hello, we're having dinner together. Why are you nodding off? What's happening with you?
Yeah, so you just say to those people, let's take a walk.
Yeah, just like
anytime I'm tired, I just go, let's go for a walk.
Yeah. So I'm going to share with you like my story of having a weird body temperature. So I had hypothalamic amenorrhea. At the time, they used to call it runner's amenorrhea. So I was an athlete. My body fat was really, really low, and I had no periods. So one of the issues that I had, one of the activities I was doing was triathlons, and I was swimming in the ocean. I could not, even with a wetsuit, I could not regulate my body temperature. I would be freezing for hours after being exposed to that cold water. Could not get it back up. One of the things that changed that was when I started focusing on supporting my hypothalamus. My body temperature, so my basal body temperature was way below normal. It's way under 97. Basal body temperature is what you take first thing in the morning. It could be underneath the tongue, or it could be axillary. It usually is going to be 97.8 to 98.2, but if it's way below that, then it's too low, okay? So what you want to do is you want to try to eventually get your body temperature up to 98.6, but it doesn't start that way first thing in the morning. So my basal body temperature was like 96.8, 97.1. It was super low. Could not get it to regulate until I started supporting my hypothalamus. Now, it took 6 to 8 weeks of hypothalamic support before I was the same temperature as everybody else. Like I wasn't freezing all the time after being exposed to anything cold. So it wasn't just hands and feet, it was my entire body. So,
Okay.
Go ahead.
I want you to talk about gallbladder for just a second. One of my good friends just had her gallbladder removed. And, I'm just seeing all these people coming across my plate that are like, oh, I'm getting my gallbladder removed. I'm getting my gallbladder removed. And so many people are struggling with gallbladder issues. And there's so many of these different kind of liver and gallbladder cleanses out there. And so I wanted to kind of get your opinion on what do you think, why is it that we're having gallbladder disease has just literally tripled, it seems like, over the last few years. And people are just, their reaction is, let me just get it removed. Let me just get it removed. And I know that the gallbladder does communicate with the hypothalamus, right? Like there's some kind of connection there. Is there any connection there? Or why is it that everybody is just getting their gallbladder removed or having issues? And I want you to talk about any liver and gallbladder cleanses that you suggest.
So gallbladder disease is usually because your bile salts become super concentrated and start to form stones so that the bile cannot be dumped out of the gallbladder because stones are blocking it, and it causes inflammation of the gallbladder. It'd be like not being able to urinate and your bladder just fills up and becomes super painful. Inflammation of the gallbladder. And if the stones are blocking it constantly and the gallbladder is inflamed, surgery is one way to deal with it, but now your liver has to then be producing enough bile. Why do you produce bile in the first place? It helps to, basically all the fatty food that you eat needs to be emulsified so that your pancreatic enzymes can function. That's what bile does. Bile acids are very, very alkaline, and that very acid chyme coming from the stomach needs to be neutralized immediately. So as soon as the stomach dumps its contents into the small intestine, bile is dumped in to meet it, to neutralize it. Otherwise, you'd burn a hole in your duodenum. And then the pancreatic enzymes can function at that perfect pH of 6.8 to 7.2. So bile has a lot of functions. Then one of the very first hormones that we understood the hypothalamus made and is also responsive to is cholecystokinin. Cholecystokinin is what controls gallbladder dumping of bile. So as soon as you eat fat and it touches your tongue, that message isn't going to your gallbladder. It's going to your hypothalamus and saying, listen, fat is coming down the chain. We're going to need some bile dumped. And so then the cholecystokinin is actually stimulated to be produced to tell the gallbladder that it's going to need to dump so much bile in order to emulsify that fat. So we've known that for a long time. It's the very first hormone we discovered that was a gut-brain connection for the hypothalamus. So what do I do with those patients? First of all, unless you have a severe stone and severe gallbladder disease, I don't recommend surgery. I've had lots of patients we've been able to avoid surgery, even with stones. So I developed a liver cleanse diet with a gallbladder flush, which is all dietary. There's no like supplements or anything to do with this. And one of the things that your audience can do, if they go to my website, genesisgold.com, there's going to be a pop-up on there that asks them if they want to join our hormone reboot training. In that particular course, which is based on my first book, I have all my dietary cleanses, the gallbladder flush, everything's in there, and it's free for them. So, and it's kind of long, so it's not something I can tell you everything today. But the idea behind it is that it helps the bile ducts become more lubricated so that there's less sediment, and it helps to clean out the gallbladder in those bile ducts. So that's the idea, is clean out the liver, clean out the gallbladder, but we still need to maintain that proper hypothalamic gut connection so that you're producing the amount of cholecystokinin so you can dump appropriately.
I want you to talk about transit time for just a second. And a lot of people recommend doing the beet test for your digestive transit time, where you basically eat, raw or cooked beets and then check your urine or stool. And there's so many different people out there. Some people say, between 8 and 12 hours, you should see something in your stool. Some people say 18 hours. Some people say as long as 24 hours. What do you think is the right amount of time for the transit for the beet test to see how fast your transit time is and what is ideal to make sure things are really moving?
8 to 12 hours after you consume beets is the proper transit time. I recommend the beet test be done in the evening, that you eat the beets in the evening so that you see that pink in the stool. 15% of people will not see it. They absorb the dye. So for those people, I use corn as their transit time test. So corn, either frozen corn or fresh corn, you're going to see it in the stool. If it's more rapid than 8 hours, you have a too rapid transit time, which basically means that you're not going to absorb your nutrients properly. If it's longer than 12 hours, you have a slow transit time, which means that you have some mild constipation. And a lot of people say, I have a bowel movement every single morning, I'm fine. I'm like, let's do a beet test and see. And they don't see it till the second day. So they have beets tonight. They don't see it tomorrow morning. They see it the next morning, the pink. That's a slow transit time. Even though they're having a bowel movement every morning, they have not, their bowels aren't completely cleaning out. So we need to, basically do a bowel cleanse and clean them out and move things along. Part of the problem with transit times being off is because your small intestine has a neurological component, again, controlled by the hypothalamus. It's called the migrating motor component. And basically what the MMC does is it moves food through the small intestine, which is 24 feet. And it's a 130-minute cycle. So every time you eat, you have this 130-minute cycle of moving food through. If you eat too soon, okay, so your food's sitting in your stomach for about a half hour, 20, 30 minutes, dumps, and then that 130-minute cycle starts. And it's very precise. It's moving the foods through so it has time to be digested and time to be absorbed. And then the ileocecal valve will open and it'll get dumped into the colon. If you interrupt that cycle by eating too frequently, you're eating every 2 hours, you're going to have issues with your transit time because your ileocecal valve's opening constantly. You may even get SIBO by getting that small, the bacterial overgrowth in the small bowel from that ileocecal valve opening constantly. A lot of us don't have great eating habits. We're constant snackers, and that is not good for digestion. We need to space those meals out at least a few hours.
And if you're seeing those beets in less than 12 hours, then what
8 to 12 hours is the key. So less than
less than 8 hours. Let's say less than 8 hours. That means that you're probably not really absorbing all the nutrients from your food.
That's right. Your transit time is way too rapid. You're not digesting and absorbing your nutrients properly.
So does that mean that maybe you're eating too fast or you're not fully chewing your food?
And it has to do with that. It has to do with that MMC complex, that motor complex. It's not functioning normally. and that is a neuroendocrine issue. So it's a nervous system issue and it's a hormone issue at the gut level. So you have to retrain that. And there's a couple of supplements that work really well with that. Ginger is helpful to retrain it, and artichoke extract to help to retrain that motility so that your body is actually moving. The small intestine is moving food through at the appropriate time so that it's not going too fast so you can absorb those nutrients.
What about if someone's seeing a ton of food particles in their stools? What would you say is the issue in that case?
So it kind of matters what the food particles are. So we are not herbivores. We do not produce cellulase. Cellulase is what you need, the enzyme you need in order to break down plants. And so certain plants are really hard to break down, like corn, okay? Lettuces, things like that. Some people will see that. If we cook those foods, especially the greens, usually you won't see it in your stool. So oftentimes, if you're seeing a lot of that, you've cooked the foods and we're not eating things like corn that nobody can digest unless you're a cow. You're not going to digest that very well. So if we're seeing those greens and things in your stool, bits of carrot and lettuces and greens and those, then it usually means that you have a little bit too rapid transit time and it hasn't spent enough time in the small intestine to break down properly.
So maybe someone's taking like too many supplements that might, make them, go to the bowel. Like if they're taking like a bowel mover or something like that, maybe they
may be pushing it through. Yeah, they may be forcing their bowels to move a little bit too quickly, or their microbiome, which is usually the case, is out of balance. They have intestinal dysbiosis, and that is actually causing them to have irritation, inflammation in the small intestine and the colon, which is causing rapid transit time. We also call that irritable bowel.
Let's talk about one of the things that is bothering me so much are endocrine disruptors. But the biggest endocrine disruptor, obviously there's, plastics and pesticides and things like that. But right now, so, we basically, like, even my son has friends that are coming over now and like to the house, and they're wearing this cologne. He's 13 and they're like wearing all this cologne. And I'm telling them, I'm like, son, tell all friends mom's allergic to colognes. Don't bring that stuff in the house. Or, even going to spas. Like I went to a nice spa and you see these like air fresheners, and even walking down like the aisle of like where all the laundry is, like I can't even breathe. Like I immediately get sick. And even if there's like an Uber, like if I go in the Uber, I send them a message like, please, I'm highly allergic to air fresheners. Why is it that some people, so like for me, I'm extreme. Like I can't take any scents at all. We don't put any laundry detergent. It's no dye, no fragrance. I do no fragrances at all except essential oils. Why am I so sensitive to where another person's like, it doesn't bother me at all? What's happening there? Why it's like I'm literally like about to fall apart while somebody else is like, it's fine. It smells good to me.
So people who have hypersensitive mast cell activity. So mast cells are basically like the Pac-Man of your white blood cells, and they kind of consume things that you've either inhaled or ingested. And they're supposed to then take that, whatever they've consumed, and bring that message to the spleen, which then tells the thymus, oh my gosh, there's chickenpox, there's COVID, there's this and that, so you can get your antibodies up, right? So when you're inhaling something that is noxious, most of us react a little bit to it, but it's not a big deal. But people who have oversensitive mast cells, what they react to it, and the mast cell literally explodes in the area, in your sinuses, in your bronchial tubes, in your gut, and you will have histamine reactions so that you feel horrible. You're tired, you're itchy, you're swollen, you have trouble breathing. You may even get diarrhea from it or stomach cramping. It matters like how much you actually got into your system. It gives you headaches, makes you feel anxious or nervous, and that's basically your mast cells are overactive and oversensitive.
Yeah.
So one way you can calm that down, first of all, if you're going to be exposed to that kind of stuff, you might need to wear some kind of mask to prevent breathing in too much, not try to expose yourself to it. But quercetin, it's Quercetin. Quercetin is a flavonoid that actually can stabilize mast cells, and it works very well to stabilize mast cells. So we use them in people, during allergy seasons, because that's hypermast cell activity, but also in people who have, chemical sensitivities.
All right. Well, let's end with you just telling us any other life-changing hormonal health hacks for your hormones that we haven't already talked about.
Well, I would say that one of the biggest things that has helped my hormones and my patients' hormones is once their hypothalamus is more in balance, they are more in tune to what their body really needs. So they're not going by a book or, by what they hear or read about the best diets and the best exercises and the best supplements. They kind of know what they need. They crave what they need. And that helps to get their neurotransmitters and their hormones in better balance. So basically listening to your body is really key. If your body is telling you that it needs something, some certain food, and it seems kind of odd, you're probably missing that particular nutrient. So, for example, I was using my hypothalamic nutraceutical for about 6 months when the fall equinox happened, and this was 20-something years ago when I first developed it. And I always had seasonal affective disorder, and within 6 weeks of the fall equinox, I would be depressed, craving carbohydrates. That was an issue. As soon as the fall equinox happened, I started craving orange vegetables. I couldn't get enough yams. I couldn't get enough pumpkin, butternut squash, kabocha. And I'm eating this like it's chocolate or something. I can't stop eating it. I have not had seasonal affective disorder since. Every fall, I eat. I just crave it. I eat it. I go with it. No seasonal affective disorder. It's been over 20 years.
Wow. Well, this has been wonderful. Tell listeners where they can find you and where they can follow you.
You can find me at genesisgold.com, which is my main website. And there, my products are there. I have a blog. I have a YouTube channel. You can follow me on social media as well. And you will also get access to our hormone reboot training, which is free, which will give you all of my tricks, diet, exercise, meditations, and teach you about how the hypothalamus is important in your health and what you can do to heal it.
Okay, wonderful. Well, you guys stay tuned. We've got another episode coming up in just a few. Bye-bye for now.